Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's live interview at Barking and Dagenham College. I'm your host, Daniel, along with my co-host over there, Lewis, and today we have a very special guest in the studio. Do you have any questions that you would like to raise to the local council? If so, today's your lucky day. Today in the studio we have the leader of the council, Dominic Twomey. Over to Lewis.
He was the deputy leader for the last 10 years, and now with his new appointed role as the leader of the council, it's finally his turn to step up to the podium and serve the residents of the borough as council leader. Today is also an opportunity where the lovely audience will be able to voice out their problems with the council, and I'm pretty sure some of them would want to. Daniel will be going around the room, so feel free to put your hand up if you have any questions. But in the meantime, let's welcome our guest, Dominic Twomey. A very good morning to you, Dominic. Hope all is well. So how exactly did you start your role as a member of our council?
So I became a councillor in 2010, which seems a really long time ago now. I was grey then, by the way. I haven't just gone grey. I've gone grey, I think, in that time. Back then, I'm sure some may remember, or your family may remember, we had an opposition party called the British National Party. Frankly, were just a group of racists who had very sort of ill-conceived ideas of what would make a good community.
UKIP.
UKIP not quite as bad, actually. They probably metamorphosised into UKIP in later years. But so the British National Party, they had councillors in Barking and Dagenham in 2006, and I just felt a personal upset at that my community would be voting, or parts of my community would be voting for people that had such radical views. And I then, with a group of people, took it upon ourselves, to join the Labour Party, because you can't really do anything on your own, and take that challenge that had been thrown down by the British National Party to reconnect with residents of this borough to try and show them there's a better way. And when I got elected in 2010 off the back of that, and what we managed to do is force out the British National Party, so they lost all of their councillors that they had got in 2006. They were all gone by 2010. And even better, I think, the leader of the British National Party at that time, a guy called Nick Griffin, decided to stand in Barking because he thought it was a really fertile spot, and he thought he potentially would become the MP, which would have been a bigger disgrace. But we absolutely wiped him out. The votes that they got were nowhere near enough to sort of keep them on the council. So that was, before that, I would say I wasn't hugely political. I had family that had been in the council, but it didn't interest me before sort of 2007. So yeah, that was a driving force that I felt a very personal upset that the community decided to support people with those views.
Yeah. Well said. And do you reckon that you yourself have made a big difference to this council?
No, everything's a team effort. So there are individuals, and obviously we all have our parts to play, but everything's a team effort. And what I've done over the last 14 years is played into that role. But I think our community have played a huge part in that, because without the community support, we wouldn't have the Labour Council that we have today, and we wouldn't have been able to do some of the things that we've done today to sort of support residents. So, look, it's always hard to sort of work out what you have personally done in that time. I've spoke to thousands of residents over the last probably 18 years. I've worked with some fantastic people, some fantastic community groups, looked at schools, colleges, spoke to people that, will be the future of this borough. So I'd like to say I've played a small part in where we are today, and I think there's much more to do moving forwards though.
Good. Well, speaking of our community, now it's time for our younger community members to ask some questions to you. So hand it off to Daniel.
Be gentle. I'm only on day 38 of being the leader, so this is the first interview that I've given. So
yeah. So
So raise your hand if you have a question, please. What is your question?
You were deputy leader for many years. Now that you have taken over as leader, how do you plan on making an impact now that you're in this position?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because you're right. I've been deputy leader for 10 years. During that time, I've dealt with finance, which has been challenging to say the least. Not just local councils, the police, the NHS, schools, college funding. It's all been really, really difficult. So it's a different role in terms of I now have got an overview of all of the council, rather than just one sort of specific area, which is finance sort of thing. So in a way, I'm quite pleased that I'll be able to give up the finance role, because it is really, really tough.
Imagine it's tiring.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of time. I haven't been able to give that up yet because of the fact that the council every year goes through a finance consultation, and we're just about to begin that. I thought it would be pretty poor to suddenly just hand that over to someone whilst we're starting that process. So I do think, though, that it's a different time. When I became the deputy leader, you move through phases over that 10 years, so it doesn't just stay the same. So we're in a new phase now, because we've got a new government, a Labour government. So actually, I think change will come from that to some extent, being able to work with not just a Labour mayor, which we've done for a number of years, but also now a Labour government, which will help to align lots of the values that I would stand for. So the difference is timing. I'm now going to be able to work with a government, hopefully, that understands areas like ours, understands that we're a poorer area compared to lots of places, lots of deprivation, and this government, I think, understands that we need support, not handouts, but support to enable people to improve their lives.
However, with the council tax now being increased, don't you think that would be detriment, because we are a poor area?
Absolutely. We have unfortunately increased council tax like many other councils up and down the country, year in, year out, for a number of years now. Partly because we and the country has a huge issue with particularly adult social care. So part of the rise every year is ring fence to support elderly, vulnerable people that need extra support because of old age, pensioners. So whether it's old age, whether it's disabilities, lots of different issues there. And what government have done, previous government, because the new government's only been in for a few months, have recognised that this group of people really need a lot of support. But what they haven't then done is followed through with the investment. And they basically said to councils, listen, if you think you've got a problem and you need more money, which they recognise we all do, then you have to raise your council tax. That's how you're going to get that extra money in. So you're in a difficult situation, because we have got the pressures in our elderly population. So if you don't raise money to help those people, then you're sort of saying we don't really need the money, if that makes sense. So we're forced into a position that by choice, I, and I know all of the councillors that I represent, would not want to continually raise council tax. It's an area of contention, and we lobbied government in the past to say, look, come on, there are some deep-rooted financial problems here in local government. Why can't you come up with a better, more sustainable, longer-term solution, rather than just every year putting the burden on poor working-class people in an area like this? So absolutely would not want to raise council tax, but the real necessity for doing that is that if we don't raise council tax, then we just would fall behind, and things would become worse and worse and worse.
Even more debt in our...
Yeah, absolutely. Even more deprived, and even worse. So if we can't raise some money to run services, then that becomes a real problem for the wider community as well. Council tax probably only accounts for about 16% of all of the spending we do, though. So again, it doesn't address all of the issues that we need to face.
More questions, please, Daniel?
How about you, sir? Have you got a question?
Why were you for the idea of raising council taxes, especially working in a borough filled with the less fortunate?
Yeah, as I just said, I think I was part of that. So when you get to making a decision of that magnitude, all of the councillors in the borough, and there's 51 in Barking and Dagenham, you have to vote on that. That has to be brought in front of councillors. You have to look at the pros and cons, the reasons why you should do it, the reasons maybe why you shouldn't do it, and it's incredibly difficult. When I became a councillor, other than sort of defeating the British National Party and you know, bringing back some semblance of order to the borough, I'd worked previously in a local charity that supported vulnerable people. I ran a welfare rights team that helped people go to tribunal for benefits or for work issues, etc. So I was acutely aware of people that have got difficult lives, chaotic lives sometimes. Financially often is a root cause of that. So I came into politics to make a change, a positive change to people's lives. Didn't ever come into politics to make cuts and savings, but that's the world that we find ourselves in. So we do think very carefully when we raise council tax, and we do have support schemes for people that really can't afford to pay. So there are various schemes in the council. There's discretionary council tax schemes where people can apply and say, look, I haven't got the money to pay my council tax, and the council can support them in that.
That's good.
But it's tough. So I make no secret of the fact it's tough on people, and we're as supportive as we can be. And for me, it's all about communication. Lots of our residents that do struggle, they communicate with us, and then we're able to sort of identify who that is and support people as much as we can before they get into really significant debt, which then leads to a spiral of all sorts of problems, you know, health and well-being. So it is really tough to continue raising that, but we just can't see a way out at this point in time until I'm really hopeful this new government, once they get to grips with the financial problems that they're facing, will give some extra money to local councils like us, so that we can then actually think in the future about not just raising council tax.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Next question, please.
Have you got a question?
As you know, our borough is a bit of a dangerous place. How do you plan to improve safety and security for residents and young people?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That, you know, although it's no more dangerous than other areas, but it's not about sort of comparing in many ways. It's about looking at, you're right, what we can do here. So, I mean, look, I mentioned the mayor earlier. So policing comes under the mayor. So primarily the police are the people that we look to for you know, supporting our residents, for improving safety, for making sure that people feel safe. We work with them. So we have enforcement teams that will, you know, go around the borough. That's really important, just so that people have visual sight of, you know, sort of our enforcement officers who work jointly with the police, so that people can see that, you know, there is something around the borough. Because we know that in difficult times, crime rises. Yeah. It's just natural, whether that's shoplifting or whether that's theft or whether there are other issues. So that's a natural effect of you know, a cost of living crisis. But what we do, we work very much with the police. We actually, key though, we listen to people. So the police and the council have regular meetings where residents are invited to attend and put down their key priorities. So if they think they've got particularly whether the issues theft from cars or burglary or violence, the police listen, the council listen, and then we look at trying to put resources into those particular areas. We also have the power to set up something called public space protection orders, where we as a council work with the police to designate an area if there are particular problems there, whether it's antisocial behaviour or knife crime or violence, and we can set that up and say to people, and the police then have powers to enforce in those areas. So we've got some powers, we've got some schemes that we run. I don't know if people have heard of the Lost Hours scheme that the council run, which is for sort of younger age sort of children, maybe first year, senior school, where you get that period of time where we've probably, not necessarily everyone's done it, but you go home, mum and dad perhaps aren't in because they're working, because we talked about deprivation and low paid jobs in this area, unfortunately. So it's those hours in between leaving school, getting home, and what children potentially can fall
where
into.
they're most vulnerable.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are putting in place, and we do have schemes, but it's all about partnership with the police, and we work very closely with the police, because for me, I said earlier about I'm just one of a team in the council, but the council itself cannot resolve all of the issues in this borough. We have to work really closely with our partners, and the police are one of them, and we work closely with them, but we also hold them to account. Yeah. So when something happens that we feel is not quite right, or our community say, look, that's a problem, then we will challenge the police as well. But we do have a good working relationship with them, and I think the only problem, there are lots of problems, but the main problem we have at the moment is that the police have been significantly hit with funding. We also know the reputational issues that the police have at the moment, and rightly so, with the issues that have happened over the last probably decade.
See, what I don't understand is why the police are getting defunded when their job is literally to help people and stop, let's say, most recently, stabbings and knife crime, and even family killing family.
I mean, look, I'm not going to get overly political here. I might get a little bit political at some point, but you'd have to bear with me. But look, we all know that the facts were there was 20,000 less police from 2010 to 2019. Granted, the last government then said, right, we're going to turn that around and we're going to employ more police officers, and they've slowly, over that period of time, because you can't just magic people to do that job. So that helped, and the new government has committed to employing, I think the figure was around about 13,000 new officers, because that is our biggest challenge, and that's their biggest challenge, having police officers on the ground being that visual deterrent. That stops people committing crime to some extent. So we often struggle as a borough. We're in something called a tri-borough command unit, where the police sort of officers work in Redbridge, Havering and Barking and Dagenham. And what happens is, when you have, probably yesterday was a classic point in case, where you have the big remembrance services across London, or the Notting Hill Carnival or other big events, police will get called away from here to sort of cover areas. So our biggest problem with the police sometimes is lobbying them to say, listen, if you can't get more police officers, stop moving them into those other areas. But they're at a loss, because actually that's, they're stretched as well. So I don't want to make light of the fact that they've got to make huge savings, and it's really difficult with them with reduced resources. But new officers, when those new officers come in, we've really got to make sure we're at the forefront of saying, listen, we want them here because of our issues.
Yeah. It's a bit sad that they have to obviously deal with everything that's going on, and it's their job, and we have to support them as well.
It's hard, right? I don't know. It's probably not a job people want to go into instinctively, into the police now, and but they've got to improve as well. They've got some bad press, and it deservedly so in some areas, and they know that, and they're trying to work to improve that. That's the wider issue, the Metropolitan Police in London. We here work really well with them. They're very community orientated. They're out there listening to people, talking to people, and trying to explain things. So, I think you've got to work with as many people. If you stop communicating or working with people, that's when things break down.
Next question, please, Daniel.
What about you? Have you got a question?
Yeah. How do you think Keir Starmer is doing it as a Prime Minister at the moment? And do you believe that he has people like us in his best interests?
Oh, is this not going to go out? He won't ever see this. Well, no, I'm only joking. Of course he won't see this. But that's a tricky question. I mean, look, he's in a really tricky position.
Yeah, give him
right?
the benefit of the doubt. He is dealing with a very tough period to come into.
Yeah, he's come in at a time where the whole country faces really significant financial problems. I think he himself said, like Britain in many ways is broke today. There are issues with the NHS, with the public sector like local government, with the police, with education. So all of those things are really difficult to deal with. But he knew that when he was coming in, and I think it says a lot about him as a person that he's faced those challenges head on, and gone, right, okay, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to get to grips with these issues. He's inherited a huge financial problem, so his legacy is how does he do what he wants to do with that backdrop of financial difficulty, some £22 billion. But they've come in, they've when we talk about young people, quite rightly, pay increase for sort of teachers, that above inflation pay increase, which is absolutely correct, because we need to not only keep but attract new people into education, new teachers that are going to be prepared to have the consistency to ensure that children in particularly areas like this, deprived areas, get good quality teaching consistently from, full-time teachers, rather than, you sort of get your substitutes come in and do that. And that consistency leads to sort of, I suppose, unfortunately, a drop in standards. Not that they're bad sort of teachers, but if you haven't got a consistent sort of teacher delivering the sort of curriculum, then it becomes a little bit difficult. But I think key for me, and this is why I do think he cares about young people, is that one of the big pledges was around sort of, pathways to opportunity and breaking down the barriers for children and young people, particularly in deprived areas. I've said it for a long time. We've said it as a council that I know, even being here today, there is so much talent in this college, in this room, but getting the opportunities has always been the problem. In some areas, you'll have better skills, better pathways into jobs, because they're more affluent. So in the London boroughs, particularly some parts of, Essex and other areas, you've got a much easier, pathway through to those better jobs. And I think that, we want to reach a level where our young people don't just hope that they might get a really good job or hope that they get into the career of their choice, but actually it's that aspiration is actually an expectation that they will. But they can only do that with good education. They can only do that with, helping people to get the best start in life. I work in a part-time job that I've actually now just had to give up, which supports families with children under the age of 5. And we all know that first, they say 1,001 days, or that first sort of 3 or 4 years in someone's life before they get into nursery will really help. It starts from now. You fall backwards if you haven't had that start in life in terms of, reading skills, in terms of speech, in terms of socialising. Then you're on the back foot immediately compared to people in more affluent areas. So breaking down those barriers. He has personally said, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have said that they will provide those opportunities, particularly in areas like this. And that's got to be absolutely fantastic, because all that talent
it's going to waste.
It's going to waste, that's right. And they're no more talented. Children in other parts of, affluent boroughs are no more talented than our children, but they just need the opportunity. And hopefully, with the investment that we and our partner organisations, developers that have done with the film studios that will be open soon in Dagenham East, which is probably really pertinent to all of you guys. We've already got a film studio in Barking called The Wolf, which has been up and running. And as part of that, our negotiations with those developers was you've got to provide opportunities for our residents, whether that's young residents sort of looking to go into that as a career, or, you know, working age residents that actually maybe could change their occupation, get better skills. So I do think everything we do as a council is aimed at, you know, the future, and it's aimed at everybody here, frankly, because you are the future. And I think the Labour government have said that as well. Education is at the absolute core of improving, you know, is a core policy aimed to improve people from working class deprived areas.
That's very, very good, that, because we all need opportunity, and it's going to push us to work even harder. Simple.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I went to school in this borough. I wasn't a great student. I don't think that's, I'm not saying that with any sort of pride. It's just the fact that I've seen education improve. I've seen all of my children go to school in the borough, and I've seen it gradually get better and better. And we are on the right path, but you know, we've still got a way to go. And I think that's, one of the earlier questions is, where's my impact going to be, having been a deputy for sort of 10 years? My impact is that actually, to continue that journey of improvement and make sure that, you know, we start to change some of the really important things. I think we've put ourselves on the map, right, with film studios, with other developments. 100%. Now what we need to do is make sure things like child poverty, which runs really high in this borough, about, you know, over 40% of our children in this borough suffer from child poverty. That's a huge figure. That's a bit shit. It is. You know, I won't use that word, but I mean, it is absolutely that. It's an awful statistic. Our unemployment rates nationally are high. We're often in the top 4 or 5 in the country. That's a terrible statistic. That's where I'm going to make my impact, because that's going to be a big focus on making sure that all of this new regeneration in the borough opens up opportunities for people like yourselves, but also, as I say, working age people, so that they can look at retraining, upskilling, and, you know, being prepared for really good quality jobs.
Yeah. Well, it's been really lovely speaking to you, and I hope we can do this again sometime and see where you are in a couple of years and what you've done in your time here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.